All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and start here with this prayer kept in our gospel book here to Holy Mother. O Mother, I throw myself and thy mercy. I take shelter at your holy feet. Be gracious, Ma, and grant that I may have pure love for thee. A love that is unsmitten by cravings for earthly things, untainted by any selfish end. A love desired by the devotees for the sake of love alone. And grant me that favor, O Mother, that I may not be deluded by the world-bewitching Maya. There is no one but you whom I can call my own. And Mother, I do not know how to worship. I am without austerity. I have neither devotion nor knowledge. Be gracious, O Mother, and out of your infinite mercy, grant me love for your lotus feet. With that, we're going to take ourselves back to August. What's that? I'll put this up. How's that? We'll go back to Thursday, August 24th, 1882. Sri Ramakrishna is talking to Hazra on the long northeast veranda of his room when M arrives. He salutes the master reverently. The master says, I should like to visit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar a few times more. The painter first draws the general outlines and then puts in the details and colors at his leisure. The molder first makes the image out of clay and then plasters it and then gives it a coat of whitewash and last of all paints it with the brush. All these steps must be taken successively. Vidyasagar fully ready, but his inner stuff is covered with a thin layer. He is now engaged in doing good works, but he doesn't know what is within himself. Gold is hidden within him. God dwells within us. If one knows that, one feels like giving up all activities and praying to God with a yearning soul. Yeah, that calling on God with a yearning soul is because of this right here, the fact that the Master can look at you or me and see exactly where we are in the process. Are we still just soft and, just have our straw outlines or just a general sketch, or are we ready for that final coat of paint? And to know that all the while that the Master's gazing at you and trying to figure out exactly what's proper for you, what's most helpful for you, what he's seeing is the gold that is you, that beautiful image of the divine, that infinitely valuable center of the self, that all of us are craving and looking for in all of these different ways through the senses. It's really the seed of our earthly desires that's been watered with ignorance. So that seed of our divine nature watered by ignorance sprouts this life of misunderstanding, this life of turmoil and struggle. But the Master looks and knows, because he's intimately aware of yourself, that divine light which comes before body and before mind, that it shines with an infinite love that has no requirement, no limit, no conditions, no bartering. That self, which is your soul, the original you, that comes bleeding through a mind and gets diverted here and there with ideas of me and mine, ideas of separateness and smallness, and then finally comes out as that personality, that body that manifests as gender and the rest of our restrictions and limitations, and garners a lot of our love and attachment for it. But in the end, that divine light, which was so unconditioned and so pure and so beautiful to begin with, now comes metered out in these little acts of love that we are very miserly about, because in inhabiting a limited body and having such a limited personality and mind, It's hard for us to imagine an infinite love. That ego of ours protects that idea, only gives to those who deserve to be given to, only forgive those who ask forgiveness in the right way or whom we deem need that forgiveness. And all the while, we could have forgiven easily and freely. We could have loved easily and freely. So this is what the Master sees, and his goal, his dream, his love is to bring us to that fullness, to bring us to that ability to be absolutely authentically present, so that that shining of that light comes out so freely. So the Master says to him, he says, Vidyasakar is fully ready, but his inner stuff is covered with a thin layer. He's now engaged in doing good works, which means, that inner spirit wants to express, that pure love in you wants to express, and so it begins by being nice. It begins by lowering that barrier of what it takes to be kind, to be compassionate, that puts that bumper sticker on the car, random acts of kindness, sweetness in our general life. So we begin that way, by trying to be nice to people, by trying to be the first one to apologize, by trying to give an extra little bit of money at the tip, or to reach out to someone on the bus and, compliment something for them, or just be nice. But yet it's still something that we think is motivated by us, that we somehow are serving mankind, or serving the world, or doing good, or changing the world for the better. And in that ego lies the karma, lies that sense of responsibility. And what that ultimately does is, to the person that's being served, if you serve them continually, it's going to give birth to resentment, right? Because you're always the good guy, and you're always helping them, the one who needs help. And this is very important why Ramakrishna taught about the karma yoga, about the idea of doing that kind of compassionate work for its own sake, as worship, as a response to the grace and the infinite love that we're coming in touch with inside, to act from that place, free of this idea of being the doer, that somehow the world is better because we're here, instead of pointing at the perfection already, which is that gold that he's pointing at within us. He doesn't know what's within himself. Gold is hidden within him. God dwells within us. You have to read something like that and think, oh my God. And it just makes you want to be quiet for a moment, where is that? How do I get in touch with that reality? God, my highest ideal of being, lives here, is that intimate. If one knows that, one feels like giving up all activities and praying to God with a yearning soul. Yeah, of course. What else would you want to do? You get an opportunity to meet, to know, to see someone, you run. You do anything for that. So the Master talked with M, now standing, now pacing up and down the long veranda. Master, a little spiritual discipline is necessary in order to know what lies within. M, is it necessary to practice discipline all through life? The Master, no. Which is a surprising answer, isn't it? It seems like, really? He says, no, but one must be up and doing in the beginning. One must have some gusto, some longing, some effort at the beginning. It's not punching in a time card, made it to church today, covered for 7 more days. Metering out little things from guilt or from fear or from anxiety. These aren't the ways to do it. It's to throw your love into. You're falling in love with the perfect partner. You have an opportunity to be in the constant presence of your highest ideal. To try and digest that thought, to try and digest that possibility, to try and accept it as real, as true. That's where everything comes from. The helmsman stands up and clutches the rudder firmly as long as the boat is passing through the waves and storms, high winds, or around the curves of a river. But he relaxes after steering through them. As soon as the boat passes the curves and the helmsman feels a favorable wind, He sits comfortably and just touches the rudder. Next, he prepares to unfurl the sail and gets ready for a smoke. Likewise, the aspirant enjoys peace and calm after the passing waves and storms of lust and greed. So this whole notion of finding out what is causing the suffering in life, it's the attachment caused by the fear of identifying with something as small as a mind, as limited and decaying as a body. That these fears that come out of us from identifying with these things that are always passing and counting them through birthdays, which, till a certain point we celebrate. And then another point it gets annoying. And the third point, it just becomes unbelievable. Oh my God, I'm that old? How did that happen? So he says in the beginning, when we're told that this divinity is within, that this gold lies within, and that it's being covered up because of your attention for the outside, wanting to shore up all of the fears that are coming out from this identity with the body, that are coming out with this lack of knowledge about our true nature, not being able to see what the sages have seen. And so as we live life, all of these curves in life, all of these sufferings are meant to engage us, meant to bring us to a level of attention, to listening, to turning all of our self, which is normally an article of action and desire and, moved by motivating things all the time, to bring that into a still state and to use everything within yourself as an ear, as a listener, to listen for that sense of peace, to try and become aware of that implied eternal self, that implied unchanging that is necessary within us, to make us aware of all of the change, to try somehow not to be caught up in the glitter of the changing world, but to remain anchored, steady, enjoying the inner peace, enjoying that quiet space that's behind a noisy mind. Some are born with the characteristics of a yogi, but they too should be careful. It is lust and greed alone that is the obstacle. It makes them deviate from the path of yoga and drags them into worldliness. Perhaps they have some enjoyment, a desire for enjoyment. After fulfilling their desire, they again direct their minds to God and thus recover their former state of mind, fit for the practice of yoga. This idea that lust and greed are the fundamental aspects of this world, this Maya that we live in. When you think about that, at first I thought that seems awfully simplistic. How can such a complex manifestation have just lust and greed at the root of it? But you breaking that apart and you see that it's really true, that if you have an opinion about somebody, if you look closely enough, you will find that the source of your opinion about that person is somewhere in that range of lust and greed. How much power do they have? How handsome or beautiful are they? How fat or thin are they? How rich or poor are they? What gender are they? All of these questions, all of these things that we notice are only noticeable to us because we're identified with a set of the same things ourselves. And it's comparative, and it's looking for an advantage. So the whole world comes just from those two impurities that come from a confused mind and an attached body. So he's saying, look beyond these things. Find your way through this. Some people are born with the advantage of being disposed, I guess, to look for the truth or to find this reality in life, this truth of life. And I don't think that these people are always religious people in that outer sense. I've met many people who seem to have developed a sense of wisdom and a very strong sense of service and love. That it wasn't religion that defines these things. It's a sincerity. It's an authenticity in ourselves. It's a clarity. You become uncomfortable with assumptions that you're making about life. You've become uncomfortable with thinking that you knew something before you actually knew it. You kind of interpolated it and set it down and walked away satisfied. But for the person who wants to know What is this thing that I wake up to every day? For the person that's curious as to when you realize that human being is just a word, that it's not what you are. It's just a descriptor that you take hold of and just accept and be like, oh, well, I'm a human being. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be a human being? What's the definition of that? And where did it come from? How is it that you're here now, but you weren't here before, seemingly? How is it that you are so confident about being this body and mind when it's changed so undeniably much in just one life? At what point was it you? At what point did it represent what you were? How is it that somehow a child who could do nothing for itself is now an adult, sagging and aged and retired, but fully supported, fully loved? How do these things happen? Some are born with the characteristics of a yogi, but they too should be careful. Have you seen the spring trap for a fish called a satkakal? No, sir, I haven't seen it. I haven't either, actually. The master says they use it in our part of the country. One end of a bamboo pole is fastened in the ground, and the other is bent over with a catch. From this end, a line with a hook hangs over the water, and the bait is tied to the hook. When the fish swallows that bait, suddenly the bamboo pole springs up and regains its upright position. Again, take a pair of scales, for example. If a weight is placed on one side, the lower needle moves away from the upper one. The lower needle is the mind, and the upper one is God. The meeting of the two is yoga. Unless the mind becomes steady, there cannot be yoga. It is the wind of worldliness that always disturbs the mind, which may be likened to a candle flame. If that flame doesn't move at all, then one is said to have attained yoga. Yes, this moving of the mind, it's the changing. He's referring to you in your nature being unchanging, being the absolute, the witness. You can't be reached or touched by the things of the senses or of the mind because you're the observer of them. You're separate from them. And when you get caught in this disturbed mind, all manner of worldliness comes to life. Now, what does that mean? What it means, your mind gets disturbed by only two things, two ideas. They're good ones, but it's only two. The ideas of me and mine. Those are the only things that cause a disturbed mind. If you find yourself disturbed or restless or unhappy, sit down and think for a moment, and you'll come to understand that it's because you're emphasizing something in your life that has to do with me and mine. Something where you're either in danger of losing something you're attached to or being in a situation you're uncomfortable with. And so these two thoughts, me and mine, they disturb the mind. And when the mind gets ripply, it no longer sees the unity. It no longer sees the harmony. Why? Because it's now got desires, and it has to strategize about how to achieve those desires. And suddenly the unity and harmony is disturbed by your need to play the game, to get what you want, to get the thing that you think you need or the thing that you think you lack. And all because, for a moment, you identified with the story of the mind about who you are, without returning to that inner peace that has been so established within you without your knowledge. Why? Because you're watching your changing world. You're enamored, intoxicated even, by the nature and flash of this changing world. So this lust and greed alone is the obstacle to yoga. Always analyze what you see. That's exactly it. And this is what's marvelous to me. And of course, I'm not, I am one to push Vedanta, what am I saying? But without the idea of having to talk anybody into it, this is one of the things I found so beautiful, is that Vedanta never required me to believe something without evidence, or to just take something on and deny something else just because it's so. That Vedanta simply requires of me to look for the truth. He says here, always analyze what you see. This world itself, there and insist on it. Show me the truth of what I'm seeing. Begin asking questions about the nature of the things you find attractive or that you want to have, or the goals that you're trying to accomplish. Look squarely, sincerely, and truthfully at the people who have those things. Or look squarely at your past experience when you were given those things. Did they last? Did they create any lasting sense of accomplishment in you? If so, why do you need more? Why are you going again? You think it's money that you need. Well, I read that, Elon Musk is worth $220 billion. He's still getting up and going to work every day and buying investments and selling stocks. Is $220 billion not enough to sit down and just say, okay, maybe I'm not going to be content. Maybe that's not the way to contentment. That's all that is necessary in this world to know the nature of yourself, to find God, if you like that word, or to find the nature of the self, if you want to talk in those terms, or to find that unity within. A dozen ways to talk about it. But pay attention to everything that you see. Always analyze what you see. What is there? Now he's talking to some men, so he's going to talk about women here in a rather colorful way. So put your seatbelt on. Always analyze what you see. What is there in the body of a woman? Only such things as blood, as flesh, as fat, entrails, and the like. Why should you love such a body? Why should you find an attraction to such a thing? And this is a wonderful exercise, if you're brutally honest with yourself like that. I remember with myself reading this verse and trying it out. I was on my walk, found a very attractive person walking toward me on the other side of the street, and I thought, okay, pay attention. Watch your mind right now. What does it want? Try and isolate it. And I said to myself, what, is it a body part? Is there something about that body you want? Here's a knife. Go take the body part you want. Ugh. That's not a body part. Is it the whole body? You want the whole body. Well, let the person lay down, let them give up their body, let them die there for you, and you can have the body. I don't want the body. Then what is the nature of your lust? If it's not a part of the body and it's not the body itself, what is the nature of lust? What you want is what's in them, that divinity. You want that life in them, that prana in them, that God within. That's what you're seeking. You're seeking for that communion. Why? Because you've forgotten it in yourself. You've walked away from it, and you're extremely hungry for it. But you've identified with the body and mind, and those are very different. And so you interpret this need for God through the needs of a body, through the needs of a mind. And it will come out as need for companionship. It'll come out as a need for money. It'll as a need as a need for security. These are how the need for divinity, for the knowledge of yourself, manifest when you believe yourself to be a body-mind. The problem with that is that you are infinite and eternal, and this world is finite and temporary. You will never be able to finish that painting. As much as you try to paint that perfect image of the beloved in the material world, you'll be at work your entire life, and the day you die, you will have gotten no closer to that image of the beloved, because it cannot be done. That God is you itself, yourself. So always analyze what you see. Why should one love such a body or such an object of any kind? Sometimes I used to assume a rajasic mood in order to practice renunciation. Once I had the desire to put on a gold-embroidered robe, to wear a ring on my finger, and to smoke on a hubble-bubble with a long pipe. He was a cool dude. So he wants to try out these things. Mathur Babu, the man who owned the estate, or who was caretaking the estate, procured all of these things for me. I wore the gold-embroidered robe, and I said to myself after a while, mind, this is what is called a gold-embroidered robe. Then I took it off and I threw it away. I couldn't stand the robe anymore. Again I said to myself, mind, this is called a shawl, and this is a ring, and this is smoking a hubble-bubble with a long pipe. I threw all of these things away once and for all, and the desire to enjoy them never arose in my mind again. That's because he had a very strong mind that had been trained to obey, trained to make its yeses yes and its nos no. So it didn't forget in that shaky way down the road of like, well, maybe I need to try it again. Maybe it was the wrong shawl. Maybe I needed a longer hubble-bubble pipe, Maybe it was something just tuned differently that I need. But he was a man of renunciation and a man of extremely sharp discernment. He could see the nature of things. There's another place where he talks about this incident where he was wearing this gold-embroidered shawl, and he realized that when he put it on, that it created ego in him. He felt special. He felt better than those around. And it burned him so much that he tore it off and threw it on the ground and was jumping on it in the dust and was going to set it on fire. When Mathur Babu comes and rescues it, takes it away, like, no, don't do that. But that was his level of commitment to his spiritual life. If something was destroying his spiritual life, if something was taking away his inner peace, he would set it on fire. That was his approach. There was no being nice to myself. I'll just have one. I'll just wear it to church, nothing else. I'll let myself keep it. It's like, yes, it was a little bit expensive. Yes, I won't do it again. It won't be a big deal. We're always trying to make room for the things that are tearing our life apart. Always making room and thinking that we're being nice to ourselves by giving ourselves passes for enjoyment. Thinking that, this isn't that bad, when it is the thing that makes you howl for peace inside. And this is what discernment will reveal to you. This is why it takes a certain amount of bravery to be able to look at the world straight on, without assumptions. To look at the world as it is and understand it is only a reflection of something beautiful, but it is not the beautiful thing itself. It is a reflection of divinity within you. You are the one that calls that view out the front door beautiful. You are the one that recognizes a flower as amazing. You are the one that gives love to the relationship that you're sharing with others. It's that divinity in you. It is not the things out there. This world is a mirror that reflects consciousness, and the consciousness it reflects is yours. So Thakur's just asking us here, pay attention. Look very closely. The day itself will become a scripture for you if you have this kind of discerning attitude. The very things that are going on in the grocery store while you're standing there in line will become scripture. They will teach you the truth if you have a mind that's dedicated to seeing truth and who accepts truth and who renounces things that are not true. It was almost dusk. The master and M stood talking alone near the door at the southeast veranda. Master to M, the mind of a yogi is always fixed on God, always absorbed in the self. You can recognize such a man by merely looking at him. His eyes are wide open with an aimless look, like the eyes of a mother bird hatching her eggs. Her entire mind is fixed on the eggs, and there is a vacant look in her eyes. Can you show me such a picture? M, I'll try and get one. As evening came on, the temples were lighted up. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on his small couch, meditating on the Divine Mother. Then he chanted the names of God. Incense was burned in the room, where an oil lamp had been lighted. Sounds of the conch shells and gongs came floating across the air as the evening worship began in the temple of Kali. The light of the moon flooded all of the quarters. The master again spoke to M. Master, perform your duties in an unselfish spirit. The work that Vidyasagar is engaged in is very good. Always try to perform your duties without desiring any result. Yeah, the key, that idea of not desiring result, boy, we throw that around lightly. And that is one of the most difficult things to do something without any desire for the result. And part of that is because we believe that there is a result. And again, there's that discernment that needs to come alive. We understand that nothing is purely a result. Every result is a cause of something else. It's an endless loop. And there is no delineation. Everything is both the cause and the result. But the mind puts in its barriers and says, nope, this is what I get for this. But it's not what you get for that. This is just going to cause the next thing. It's going to give you more desire. And so we don't do things to get things because we know something. What is that one thing that we know? That I am ever free, that I am ever pure, that I am love itself, that nothing can be added to me or taken from me. I am the whole and the entirety and everything beyond. Knowing who you are is what releases you from desire. Finding that inner stillness within, which will manifest for you. That's what he says. He says is that once the rudder gets set and once you get out of the river and once all the work of getting the spiritual practice done on a daily basis and with some level of commitment and love, once that's all established, God himself begins to show you things, begins to share things with you, just for the fun and light of the walk with you, showing you things that you would not have been able to see in a noisy mind. Give you things that you wouldn't be able to appreciate because you hadn't learned to see the subtle beauty of that inner space. You hadn't begun to fall in love with your very own self for its very own sake. And it hadn't yet begun to spill out into the world around you because you were still trying to game the system to get something for me or to call something mine. So please, perform your duties in an unselfish spirit. The work that Vidyasagar is engaged in is very good. Always try to perform your duties without desiring any result. M. Yes, sir. But may I know if one can realize God while performing one's duties? Can Rama and desire coexist? The other day I read in a Hindi couplet, where Rama is, there desire cannot be. Where desire is, there Rama cannot be. Master. All, without exception, perform work. Everybody has duties. There's nobody without duties. There's nobody who doesn't work, doesn't have to work in this world. Even to chant the name and glories of God is work, as is the meditation of the non-dualist on I am He. Breathing, that's even an activity. There is no way of renouncing work altogether. So do your work, but surrender the results to God. Yeah, make your life, make your duties, make the things that you do. That's corny. I like it though. That notion of make your life a love letter. You know, remember falling in love and remember what it felt to write that note, pass it in class, hoping nobody reads it before it gets to the goal. Remember that light and that love and begin to live that way again. Give yourself permission to be childish in that way in your relationship with the divine, in your relationship with this world around you. To write down things and offer them. There was a woman that came to me one time who had this had a lot of trouble with her teenage daughter. And her daughter was rebelling on her and completely not appreciating her as a mom. I know that's a very unique situation, but stretch your mind for a moment. So this teenage kid was thankless for all the things the mother was doing. The mother was telling me, she's like, you wouldn't believe, she has to go to like 3 or 4 different meetings every day that I have to drive her to. I take her to school, I pick her up, I make her lunch, I make her dinner, I clean her room, I make her bed. And she treats me horribly. And she says, I'm only coming to you because I have begun to resent my own daughter. And that terrifies me. I don't know what to do. And so we sat and thought for a while, and we looked at some scriptures like this, and we decided that she should, anytime she does something for her daughter, she's going to write it on a little slip of paper. Took her to practice, picked her up at school. made her bed. And at the end of the day, she would take that little stack of papers into the shrine. She would start a little fire in there with what's that stuff that doesn't have any smoke and it burns? Camphor. So she would start a little camphor fire in a brass bowl on her shrine, and she would offer all of these things that she had done for her daughter, in an attempt to understand that everything she did for her daughter, she did for the divine, for the beloved. And to understand that it had nothing to do with her daughter and it had nothing to do with her, that it was her nature as a mother to love her daughter because there was divinity in both, because there was God everywhere. And to take our eyes off of the changing, to take our eyes off of the apparent, the bodies and the minds running around, stop assuming that everybody's a body and mind, and begin to look for the presence of God in their eyes, in their actions, in their being, and serve that. Become more aware of that than you are of the easy stuff. Look deeper and find the motive of love in everything that's going on around you. Even the most heinous things are motivated by love. Even the worst occurrences in history happened because of love. The problem is that we begin to love objects and temporary things, and when you do that, there's another side of love that manifests as hate. The hate is what love looks like when it's not for you. So if someone is loving everyone, they have no hate. No one will see any hate in that. That's a Jesus or a Buddha. For someone very convinced of their body-mind, that's a Hitler. And in that, very few people will see the love, and a very large number of people will suffer his hatred. So that's the importance of spiritual life. It's not just getting to a heaven or getting someplace really happy. It's undoing everything that we see wrong with the world because we've learned to love. We've learned to diminish ego. And in that, war stopped. In that, there was enough food to feed everyone. In that, there was a chance at peace. This is why you practice. This is why we read about these beautiful men and women who've done the work for a very long time, with an intensity hard to match. And they've told us, you don't have to match it. Just do a little bit of it. It will catch fire, and it will take it yourself. M says, well, sir, may I make an effort to earn more money? The Master, it is permissible to do so, to maintain a religious family. You may try to increase your income, but in an honest way. The goal of life is not earning money, but the service of the divine. Money is not harmful if it is devoted to the service of the divine. M. How long should a man feel obliged to do his duty toward his wife and his children? That's a dangerous question. Master, as long as they feel pinched for food and clothing. But one need not take the responsibility of a son when he is able to support himself. When the young fledgling learns to pick its own food, the mother pecks it if it comes to her for food. M. Well, how long must one do his duty? Master, the blossom drops off when the fruit appears. One doesn't have to do one's duty after the attainment of God, nor does one feel like doing it then. And interestingly enough, that is the period when duty ceases to be duty and becomes worship. So it's not that unpleasant thing that you have to do. It's a natural response to the world of grace that you begin to live in with a person who sees, with an accuracy, with a determination to know truth, who's able to find an authentic center of divinity within themselves that allows them to manifest infinite love. What is duty in the light of infinite love? The Peace Pilgrim said it's an opportunity for service. That's all. Every moment is an opportunity for service. If a drunkard takes too much liquor, he cannot retain consciousness. If he takes only 2 or 3 glasses, he can go on with his work. As you advance nearer and nearer to God, he will reduce your activities little by little. Have no fear. Now, this is interesting. In this little example that he's drawing here, this metaphor, who is the wine? Who is the alcohol? It's God. So he's saying, a drunkard takes too much liquor, he can't retain his consciousness. If he takes only 1 or 2 glasses, he can go on with his work. As you advance nearer and nearer to God, imbibing more and more of this divinity, he will reduce your activities. Those things that distract you, those things that take you into the world of duty, into the world of results. He will reduce your activities little by little. Have no fear. Finish the few duties you have at hand, and then you will have peace. When the mistress of the house goes to bathe after finishing her cooking and other household duties, she won't come back, however you may shout after her. M. Sir, what is the meaning of the realization of God? What do you mean by God vision? How does one attain it? And this response will be a good place to close. He says, according to the Vaishnavas, the aspirants and the seers of God may be divided into different groups. There are the pravartakas, the sadhakas, the siddha, and the siddha of the siddha. He who has just set foot on the path may be called a pravartaka. He may be called a sadhaka who has for some time been practicing spiritual disciplines such as worship, japa, meditation, the chanting of God's name and glories. He may be called a siddha who has known from his inner experience that God exists. An analogy is given to the Vedanta to explain this. The master of the house is asleep in a dark room. Someone is groping in the darkness to find him. He touches the couch and says, nope, it's not him. He touches the window. Nope, that's not him either. He touches the door. Nope, not he. This is known in the Vedanta as the process of neti-neti. Not this, not this. At last his hand touches the master's body, and he exclaims, ah, there he is. In other words, he is now conscious of the existence of the master. He has found him, but doesn't yet know him intimately. There is another type, known as the siddha of the siddha, the supremely perfect. It is quite a different thing when one talks to the master intimately, when one knows God very intimately through love and devotion. A siddha has undoubtedly attained God, but the supremely perfect has known God very intimately. But in order to realize God, one must assume one of these attitudes: Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, or Madhur. Santa, the serene attitude. The rishis of olden times had this attitude toward God. They did not desire any worldly enjoyment. It is like the single-minded devotion of a wife to her husband. She knows that her husband is the embodiment of beauty and love, a veritable madan. Dasya, the attitude of a servant toward his master. Hanuman had this attitude toward Rama. He felt the strength of a lion when he worked for Rama. A wife feels this mood also. She serves her husband with all her heart and soul. A mother also has a little of this attitude, as Yashoda had toward Krishna. Sakhya, the attitude of friendship. Friends say to one another, come here and sit near me. Sridama and other friends sometimes fed Krishna with fruit, part of which they had already eaten, and sometimes climbed on his shoulders. Vatsalya, the attitude of a mother toward her child. This was Yashoda's attitude toward Krishna. The wife, too, has a little of this. She feeds her husband with her very lifeblood, as it were. The mother feels happy only when the child has eaten to his heart's content. Yashoda would roam about with butter in her hand in order to feed Krishna. Madhur, the attitude of a woman toward her paramour. Radha had this attitude toward Krishna. The wife also feels it for her husband. This attitude includes all of the other 4. So this is what it is to know God. To see God at that level of reality where you've come to not only sense the presence of the divine, but when you actually begin to interact with the presence of the divine, and when your life actually becomes an ongoing dance. That's the image that always comes to mind. When your life, this moving through this world, when you don't forget the presence of God, when you don't forget that inner peace and stillness, when you're not pulled out into the world of the changing, when you go out to do grocery shopping, when you're on the freeway in traffic, when you are able to stay established within with the thought of that unconditioned, unlimited source of love that is your very self, you dance with it in everyone and everything. And you can focus on God as your child, focus on God as your lover, focus on God as your friend, but basically all of your friends become God to you. Your partner becomes God to you. Your children become God to you. Not in the sense that they rule your life with an unconquering hand of demands, that you obey me and do what I say, not in that sense at all, but in the sense of inspiration, the sense of that sparkle of love that is naturally there between you and that person. That becomes the thing you see first. That's the thing you serve in that relationship. Not the person as a person, not the relationship as a relationship, but the thing as a reflection of that divine love, pure and ever free. And in that there's no tiredness, there's no sorrow, there's no loss. In that is your freedom. Thakur says, do your practice. Practice hard, and God himself will show these things to you. Does anyone have any comments or questions, concerns? All right. Let's just take a few moments before our 6 o'clock Vespers. Sure. I was told I didn't have to. All right, the Santa Barbara Temple. This is where we are. Sunday, spiritual talks at 11. Tomorrow morning, Swami Chidbrahmananda, is going to speak on aspects of attention. And next week, Swami Arupeshananda, just as a side note, one of my favorite speakers, is talking on the near-death experience. Classes and other events on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. is For Seekers of God, with our sister Swami Krishna Prana. And on the 7th, that's already passed. On the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th, that's the remaining Saturdays, at 5 p.m., there's this class, the one that we just finished. So I always tell people, or always like to share, who am I to tell you, but to share, this place is your own. The reason that it was built was to nurture your conquest of love, for you to find your truth, and for you to use it as a support to whatever your practice is. Whatever variety of spiritual or religious ideal you foster is welcome here. And this place is to nurture it as it is within you and to expand it to include everything and everyone. So use this place. Don't at all feel shy. Come here and leave something behind in the way of an hour of meditation during the day, or 5 minutes of thinking of God. It changes the room, it changes the atmosphere, and the people who come in behind you can enjoy that. So be a part of that, make it a part of you. Do what's necessary to realize your highest ideal.